The armory buzzed with alien voices, a cacophony of clicks, hums, and guttural tones as soldiers from across the galaxy gathered for a rare spectacle. At its center, Private James Callahan stood, his human figure stark against the shimmering, futuristic armor of the Coalition soldiers. His M4 carbine rested against his shoulder, its matte black finish absorbing the artificial light. Zalor, the Cheon weapons expert, held the rifle delicately, his spindly claws turning it over as though inspecting an ancient artifact. His mandibles clicked in mockery. "You call this a weapon? Looks more like a farming tool." A wave of laughter rippled through the assembled troops. Their sleek, energy-based weaponry gleamed under the lights. Plasma rifles, ion cannons, and compact particle blasters, all marvels of modern engineering. In comparison, the human weapon seemed primitive, a relic from a bygone era. Callahan remained silent, his expression unreadable. He had heard it all before, the jabs, the disbelief, the scorn. Humans were the newcomers to the Coalition, seen as underdogs with outdated technology and little to offer. He tightened his grip on the rifle, feeling the weight of Earth's pride resting in his hands. "Care to explain this relic's capabilities, Private Callahan?" Commander Threx's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The towering reptilian officer's shimmering scales reflected the room's light, his tone equal parts curiosity and skepticism. Callahan stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "This is an M4 carbine," he said evenly, meeting the commander's gaze. "Shoots 5.56 by 45 mm NATO rounds. Lightweight, reliable, effective range of about 500 meters. Zalor snorted, waving his claws dismissively. 500 meters? That's quaint. Our plasma rifles disintegrate targets at twice that distance without needing projectiles. Why waste time with such archaic methods?" Callahan allowed himself a small smirk. "Because it works." The laughter returned, louder this time. Zalor leaned in, his multi-lensed eyes glinting with amusement. "Works? Against what? A herd of grazing beasts? This thing couldn't scratch our energy shields." Commander Threx raised a claw, silencing the room. His piercing gaze locked on Callahan. "Enough speculation, let's put the humans' claims to the test." The room hushed. The soldiers exchanged eager glances as Threx gestured toward the firing range. "Private Callahan, you have the floor. Show us what your relic can do." Callahan nodded, stepping toward the range. Behind him, the jeers continued, though now tinged with a trace of curiosity. The alien soldiers followed, their footsteps a mixture of heavy thuds and soft padding. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as they prepared to witness what they were certain would be a humiliating display. The firing range was a vast, high-tech expanse filled with targets, reinforced metal plates, shimmering energy shields, and holographic drones. The walls bore the scars of countless tests, blackened scorch marks from plasma burns and deep gouges from ion blasts. It was a place where weapons were put to the ultimate test. Zalor sneered, his claws tapping a rhythm against his rifle. "Let's see how your relic fares against real targets." Callahan took his position, flipping the safety off with a practiced motion. His breathing steadied, his eyes focused. He aimed at the first target, a solid metal plate, and squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of the rifle echoed through the range, a sound alien to the Coalition soldiers. The bullet struck dead center, punching a clean hole through the plate. The aliens stared, their expression shifting from amusement to mild surprise. "Impressive," Zalor admitted begrudgingly. "For metal. Try the shield next." Callahan adjusted his aim, targeting a shimmering energy barrier. He fired again. The bullet pierced the shield with a faint flicker, embedding itself in the target behind. The room fell silent. Commander Threx narrowed his eyes. "Explain." "Physical projectiles," Callahan said, lowering his rifle, "aren't affected by energy dispersion fields like plasma or particle beams. Shields designed to stop energy don't stop physics." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Their confidence wavered, the first cracks forming in their belief of technological superiority. Threx's voice broke the tension. "Prepare the next test. Let's see if this weapon can keep up." The soldiers murmured, a mix of doubt and intrigue. Callahan stepped back, his calm demeanor unshaken. The challenge was just beginning. The atmosphere in the firing range shifted palpably as Commander Threx barked orders to the technicians. They scrambled to prepare the next phase of the demonstration, a test of precision and reaction speed that was a staple for Coalition soldiers. A series of automated targets began to rise from the floor, each fitted with a shimmering energy shield. They zipped erratically across the range, their patterns designed to be unpredictable. Some shifted elevation, others disappeared momentarily behind barriers, and a few mimicked aggressive approaches. This was no static test, it was a grueling gauntlet meant to push even the Coalition's most advanced weaponry to its limits. Zelor crossed his spindly arms, his mandibles clicking with renewed confidence. Let's see how your Relic handles real speed. Plasma rifles can neutralize these targets in seconds. Callahan slotted a fresh magazine into his rifle, his movements unhurried but precise. He glanced at the targets, then back at the soldiers watching him with a mixture of skepticism and amusement. Let's see what happens. On my mark, Threx commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. 3, 2, 1, go. The range erupted into controlled chaos. The targets moved at blinding speeds, their shields flaring as they zipped and darted across the vast space. Energy-based weaponry excelled in this scenario. Instantaneous discharge, no delay from a physical projectile. The soldiers watched, expecting Callahan to falter. But then he began firing. The sharp cracks of the rifle echoed in rapid succession, each shot deliberate and measured. The sound was almost musical, a rhythmic cadence that cut through the tension in the room. Callahan tracked the targets with unerring focus, his eyes calm and unblinking as he squeezed the trigger. The first target's shield flickered and died, the bullet piercing through to clang against the metal behind it. The second followed a split second later, then a third. Each time a target shifted direction or briefly disappeared, Callahan adjusted effortlessly, predicting its movements with uncanny accuracy. The soldiers watched in stunned silence. One by one, the targets fell, each strike precise and devastating. The rifle, dismissed as primitive moments ago, sang a relentless song of destruction. Zelor's confidence visibly eroded as he leaned forward, his multi-lensed eyes glued to the scene. This isn't possible, he muttered, his voice barely audible. How can he keep up? Callahan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The results spoke louder than words. The final target darted high into the air, its erratic movements a challenge even for the Coalition's finest marksman. Callahan exhaled slowly, tracked it for a heartbeat, and fired. The shield flickered, the target dropped, and a metallic clang marked the bullet's impact. The range fell silent. Threx stepped forward, his scaled hand gesturing toward the smoking remains of the targets. "Explain," he demanded, though his tone lacked the mockery from earlier. "Practice," Callahan said simply, lowering his rifle. "We train with moving targets constantly. It's not about speed, it's about predicting the enemy's next move and acting before they can react." Zelor bristled, his mandibles twitching. "But plasma is instantaneous. How can you outpace energy weapons with that?" Callahan turned, his gaze steady. "Your weapons rely on tech, ours rely on skill. You've optimized for perfection, but in war, perfection doesn't always win. Adaptability does." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The alien soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of what they'd just witnessed sinking in. They had mocked the rifle, dismissed it as a relic, but it had outperformed expectations in a way none of them could deny. "Prepare the final test," Threx ordered, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "We'll see how your weapon handles true power." Callahan nodded, his expression unchanging. He stepped back as the technicians worked, the sound of their equipment a dull hum in the background. He knew what was coming and he welcomed it. The real test was just beginning. The floor of the firing range rumbled as a massive target rose from a hidden compartment. It was unlike anything the Coalition soldiers had seen before. A multi-layered block of reinforced metal coated in energy-dispersive plating, designed to withstand the most advanced plasma weaponry. It shimmered ominously, a monolith of invulnerability. "This is the Apex Shield," Threx announced, his voice booming. "It's impervious to plasma, ion bursts, and even high-yield explosives. Let's see if your relic can make a dent. The soldiers murmured, some already shaking their heads. This was a statement, not a test. The Apex shield was the Coalition's crowning achievement in defensive technology. Even their most potent weapons only left scorch marks. For a kinetic weapon to even scratch it? Laughable. Callahan calmly approached the firing line, unstrapping a small case from his gear. He opened it, revealing a specialized magazine and a sleek cylindrical attachment. Without a word, he began preparing his rifle. "What are you doing?" Zelor asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. "No projectile can penetrate that shield." Callahan didn't look up. This isn't just any projectile. The attachment clicked into place with a satisfying snap, and he loaded the magazine with precision. He turned to the crowd, his expression unreadable. Armor-piercing rounds, custom-made for situations like this. Zelor scoffed, though his confidence had wavered. Custom rounds? Against the Apex shield? That's ridiculous. Callahan simply gestured toward the towering block. "You wanted a demonstration." Threx raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "Proceed, Private." Callahan adjusted his stance, shouldered the rifle, and took a deep breath. The room fell into a tense silence, the soldiers leaning forward in anticipation. The Apex shield loomed before him, an impenetrable challenge meant to crush any remaining credibility he had. He fired. The rifle barked loudly, the sound reverberating through the chamber. The bullet struck the Apex shield dead center, and for a moment nothing happened. The aliens began to murmur, Zelor's mandibles twitching in triumph. But then a faint crack appeared, spidering outward from the point of impact. The sound of splintering metal filled the room. The Apex shield groaned as a chunk of its outer layer crumbled away, revealing a jagged tear in the metal beneath. Gasps rippled through the crowd, disbelief etched across every alien face. "That's impossible," Zelor whispered, stepping closer to examine the damage. "How?" "Physics," Callahan said, his tone calm. "That round was designed to focus all its energy into a single point of impact. No dispersion, no wasted force, just pure penetration." Threx approached the damaged shield, running his clawed hand over the gash. His eyes narrowed as he turned to Callahan. "Your weapon bypassed decades of defensive engineering. You exploited a weakness we didn't even consider." Callahan shrugged. "Sometimes it's not about having the most advanced tool, it's about knowing where to strike." Zelor's confidence had completely evaporated. "You planned for this. You knew you'd face something like this." "No," Callahan replied, locking eyes with him. "We planned to survive, and survival means being prepared for anything." Threx nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of respect and introspection. "Your weapon isn't primitive. It's precise, calculated, adaptable, traits we've neglected in our pursuit of technological superiority." The soldiers were silent now, their earlier jeers replaced by an uneasy reverence. Callahan had done more than just demonstrate his weapon's capabilities. He had exposed a flaw in their thinking, a blind spot they had never considered. "Prepare to engage the secondary system," Threx ordered the technicians. "We need to see what happens when this weapon faces true resistance." Callahan didn't flinch. He stepped back, checking his equipment as the technicians worked. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the growing respect and unease in their stares. This wasn't just a test of his rifle anymore. It was a test of humanity itself. The technicians activated the secondary system, and the floor trembled once more. This time, the Apex shield wasn't alone. A cluster of automated defense drones emerged, their sleek forms hovering in perfect formation around the reinforced block. Their energy cannons glowed with ominous light, and their movements were eerily precise. "This isn't just a test of your weapon, Callahan," Threx said, his tone sharp. "It's a test of your tactics. Let's see how you handle resistance." The alien soldiers murmured in approval. This was more in line with their expectations. Dynamic combat. Surely the human's primitive weapon would falter against a coordinated assault. Callahan, however, didn't react with surprise or hesitation. He calmly reloaded his rifle, his expression unreadable. "So it's a puzzle now?" he asked, a faint smile playing on his lips. Zelor sneered, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "A puzzle you can't solve, human?" Callahan moved to the firing line, scanning the field with sharp, calculating eyes. The drones began to circle the apex shield, their weapons tracking his every movement. The air in the room grew heavy with tension. "On your command," Threk said, his voice echoing through the chamber. Callahan took a slow breath. "Let's get started." The drones opened fire. Bright streaks of energy lit up the room, sizzling through the air toward Callahan. He dove to the side, rolling into a crouch behind a low barrier. The energy blasts scorched the floor where he had stood moments earlier, leaving smoldering marks. The aliens watched intently, their earlier skepticism replaced by a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Callahan popped up from cover, his rifle snapping to his shoulder. A crack rang out, and one of the drones wobbled, its propulsion system sparking as it spiraled into the ground. "One down," he muttered, already moving to a new position. The remaining drones adjusted their formation, tightening their guard around the apex shield. They fired in unison, forcing him to dart behind another barrier. The soldiers murmured among themselves. Callahan wasn't just relying on his weapon. He was thinking several steps ahead, using the terrain to outmaneuver the drones. His movements were deliberate, each action part of a larger plan. "What's he doing?" Zelor whispered, his mandibles clicking nervously. "He's studying them," Threk said, his voice filled with grudging admiration. "He's treating this like a chess game, not a firefight." Callahan peeked around the barrier, firing another shot. The round pierced a drone's core and it exploded in a shower of sparks. The remaining drones responded by increasing their rate of fire, saturating the area with energy blasts. Callahan ducked, letting the shots pass overhead before rolling to a new position. The apex shield loomed behind the drones, its imposing form untouched. Callahan's focus, however, wasn't on the shield itself. He was dismantling the drones one by one, systematically removing their defenses. With each precise shot, another drone fell. When the last drone hit the ground, the room fell silent again. Callahan emerged from cover, his rifle steady as he aimed directly at the apex shield. He fired a single shot, the armor-piercing round streaking toward the weakened block. It struck with a deafening crack, and the shield groaned under the impact. A moment later, it crumbled, its layers collapsing into a pile of twisted metal. The alien soldiers were stunned. Zelor's mandibles hung open, his confidence shattered. Threk stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the wreckage. He turned to Callahan, his expression unreadable. "You dismantled their defenses to expose the target," Threk said. "You treated the drones as extensions of the shield, not separate threats." Callahan nodded, lowering his rifle. "Every piece of the puzzle matters. It's not about brute force, it's about strategy. You can't just shoot your way through everything, sometimes you have to dismantle the problem." Zelor finally found his voice. "You're saying you planned this from the start?" "Not the specifics," Callahan admitted, "but the principles always." Threx extended a hand toward Callahan, his voice carrying a note of respect. "Your people are more dangerous than we gave them credit for. Your tactics, your precision, they are enlightening." Callahan shook his hand firmly. "We're not trying to be dangerous. We're trying to survive. Sometimes, that's the same thing." The alien soldiers began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about what they had witnessed. Zelor lingered, his gaze flicking between Callahan and the wreckage of the apex shield. "You've given us much to think about, human," Zelor said quietly, his tone tinged with respect. "Perhaps we've been too focused on our strengths and blind to our weaknesses." Callahan slung his rifle over his shoulder, offering a faint smile. "The galaxy's a big place. There's always something to learn." As Callahan walked out of the range, the whispers of the alien soldiers followed him. He had done more than prove the effectiveness of his weapon. He had challenged their understanding of warfare itself. And as the Coalition reconsidered their approach, humanity's place among the stars grew a little more secure.